Batman has one of the greatest rogues galleries in all of fiction. Twisted, emotionally complex villains with interesting gimmicks that push him to his limits. And among them, Professor Pyg stands out as one of the most disturbing. A relatively recent creation, Pyg first appeared in 2007's Batman 666, written by Morrison. He is an utterly repulsive, grotesque reflection of our obsession with physical perfection and homogenized beauty standards. He sees himself as a surgeon of the soul, manipulating his victims in pursuit of his own warped sense of beauty, and his methods of enhancing his victims are equally bizarre. While most surgeons use delicate tools like scalpels, Pyg uses power tools and crude masks which are chemically bonded to their faces, drugging them into submission and turning them into his mindless Dollotrons. It's body horror at its finest, or worse depending on how you look at it. So he's not exactly a child-friendly supervillain, is he? And when he appeared in 2013's Beware the Batman, he was hardly recognisable. The show looked at this monstrous villain and said, what if he was just a silly lumbering guy driving around in an old-fashioned car armed with a blunderbuss? Instead of the twisted surgeon with unconventional beauty standards and a god complex, the show gave us a quirky animal-themed eco-terrorist with a penchant for elaborate revenge schemes. To understand the changes Beware the Batman made, it's important to know where Professor Pyg came from. As I mentioned earlier, Professor Pyg first appeared in Batman 666, a story set 15 years in the future when Damian Wayne is Batman, and some of Gotham's most high-profile criminals are murdered. Professor Pyg is one of the 5 villains that are killed off, crucified upside down by the Bat Devil, a satanic version of Batman. His first proper appearance wouldn't come until Batman and Robin #1, when Dick Grayson became Batman after Bruce Wayne had been killed by Darkseid. But don't worry, he got better. Morrison's Batman run introduced an array of new villains, but none were as disturbing as Pyg. With his grotesque pig mask, unsettling sing-song manner of speaking, and his obsession with fixing people, he was a different kind of criminal. He wasn't interested in power or money. He wanted to impose his twisted idea of perfection on the world, and if that meant mutilating people, turning them into faceless dolls and completely erasing their identities, then so be it. This wasn't just surface-level horror either. Pyg's philosophy made him a genuinely disturbing character. He represents the extreme end of control, an artist who sees human individuality as an imperfection to be corrected. His Dollotrons are not just victims, they're symbols of lost autonomy, their identities erased by his surgeries. That makes him uniquely terrifying even in Batman's rogues gallery, a villain driven not by personal gain, but by a fundamental, horrifying ideology. Pyg wasn't alone in his mission. He formed a group of unusual people to help him, which he called Circus of the Strange. The roster included Big Top, a bulbous strong person, Siam, acrobatic conjoined triplets, the Flaming Phosphorus Rex, who would also appear in Beware the Batman as one of Tobias Whale's henchmen, and isn't an alternate version of Dr. Phosphorus, and Mr. Toad, an amphibious man that took his name from The Wind in the Willows, and was killed off in his first storyline. The gang operated out of a travelling circus, and they assisted Professor Pyg by kidnapping his victims. After DC's continuity was reset during the New 52 in 2011, Professor Pyg was given an expanded origin. Dr. Laszlo Valentin was a surgeon that moonlighted as an agent for the rogue agency Spiral, creating mind-altering toxins. He wound up getting exposed to these chemicals, which drove him mad. He's hardly one of Batman's most significant villains, but he was synonymous with the Dick Grayson and Damian Wayne era of Batman and Robin, plus his distinct design fits in very well with the other brightly coloured established Batman rogues. The more comic book accurate versions of Pyg have appeared in Gotham Batman, the Brave and the Bold, where he had a brief cameo in an episode about a potential future Batman, and the game Arkham Knight, where he was the boss fight at the end of one of the side missions. But Beware the Batman set out to make him one of their primary villains. I've talked about this previously in my Beware the Batman retrospective video, which you should totally watch if you haven't seen it already. I've linked to it in the info button and the video's description box. But the creative team set out to use Batman's more obscure villains, rather than just doing another version of the Joker, Catwoman and the Riddler. Their intention was to carve out a unique space in Batman's animated history by shining a light on overlooked threats. This was an admirable decision, but also a risky one. The big names are popular for a reason, and the show had to work extra hard to make these obscure villains compelling. But at the same time, the characters they used had to fit the show's more child-friendly approach, which is why so many of the villains were completely reworked, almost to the point of being entirely new characters. And that's where Professor Pyg comes in. Instead of a horrifying surgeon, he became an over-the-top theatrical animal rights activist, paired with Mr. Toad, his equally eccentric sidekick. This version of Pyg wasn't interested in body horror. He wanted revenge against those who had harmed the natural world. Though he does arm himself with a surgeon's tools, bone saws, defibrillators and so on. It's an understandable change given the show's target audience, but it is a drastic one. I like the fact that Pyg and Toad have a point about how greedy industrialists are happy to destroy the planet in the name of lining their own pockets, but their methods aren't exactly sound. Pyg and Toad made their debut in the very first episode, Hunted, immediately establishing their new roles as vigilante extremists. And I feel like this was a statement of intent, making it clear that this new show was going to focus on underrepresented characters. Pyg and Toad aimed to punish 3 industrialists for their crimes against nature. Instead of power tools and brainwashing, they just used elaborate death traps and a theatrical sense of justice. The shift is immediate. This isn't a deranged surgeon obsessed with perfection, but a self-righteous Cockney Avenger wielding a twisted moral compass. They really leaned into the Wind and the Willows aesthetic, with Pyg and Toad's sense of fashion, their distinctive vehicle, and the tools they use in their arsenal. Throughout the series, Pyg and Toad continue targeting individuals they deemed guilty of crimes against the environment. In instinct, they go after some high-profile figures in the fashion world who use animal products in their clothes. Their methods are elaborate, often cartoonish, but are always driven by their belief that they are delivering justice. In Reckoning, they play a minor role in a larger plot. When Ra's al Ghul takes over Gotham, he frees the captive supervillains, telling them that if they're able to capture Batman for him, he will give them a piece of Gotham to rule. However, these villains aren't able to cooperate with each other, which makes it far easier for Batman to evade them. By this point, it's clear that they've been fully cemented as recurring comic relief villains. They're dangerous, sure, but never truly terrifying. The last major appearance of Pyg and Toad comes in the episode Doppelganger. The two hijacked Kirk Langstrom's research in an attempt to create an army of human-animal hybrids. I was amused that their solution to taking over a city protected by Batman was to make a Batman of their own, in this case Man-Bat. As amusing as that was, there was also a far more disturbing element. The two kidnapped 3 women with the intention of turning one of them into a bride for Mr. Toad, which is both gross and creepy. Especially when Toad decided to settle for Katana as his bride after the other victims escaped. So what do these changes mean for Professor Pyg as a character? In many ways, this version is almost unrecognisable from his comic book counterpart. His entire philosophy has been rewritten. He no longer cares about fixing people, only punishing those he believes are harming the world. The horror element is almost entirely gone, replaced by something closer to classic Saturday morning villainy. For Beware the Batman, this was a necessary move. The story was aiming for a broader audience, and adapting Pyg's original character would have been impossible. You can't put something like Dollotrons in a show meant for children. But at the same time, I can't shake the feeling that something crucial was lost. Yes, they added back the mind-controlling element in Doppelganger, but Pyg in the comics is terrifying, not just because of what he does, but because of why he does it. His ideology makes him uniquely unsettling, and without it, he's just another costumed crook with a gimmick. That's not to say that this version is bad, not at all. In fact, within the context of the show, he works pretty well. His partnership with Mr. Toad adds a fun dynamic, and their over-the-top schemes bring a theatrical energy to the series. But it does raise the question, was this really the best character to adapt? If Pyg had to be changed that much to fit the show's tone, was he the right choice in the first place? And honestly, I'm kind of conflicted. Beware the Batman took one of the most grotesque, terrifying villains in Batman's history and transformed him into something completely different. Gone was the deranged surgeon, replaced with a theatrical eco-terrorist and a slew of elaborate schemes. This wasn't just an adaptation, it was a complete reinvention. For some, this might feel like a betrayal of what makes Professor Pyg compelling, but for others, it's an example of how a show can take creative liberties to fit its vision. Whether you see it as a clever reinterpretation or a missed opportunity depends on what you want from a Batman villain. But one thing's for sure, this isn't the Professor Pyg that Grant Morrison envisioned. And maybe that's for the best. Okay, that's it for this week's essay. If you liked the video, don't forget to like, share, subscribe, leave a comment, tell all your friends about me. You know how YouTube works. If you really enjoyed the video and have the means, please consider making use of the thanks button to send a buck or two my way, because every little helps. I offer channel memberships for $1.99 a month. This will get you early access to my weekly video essay, priority responses to your comments, members-only videos, custom emojis, and an icon on your profile indicating that you're one of my people. And special thanks to my current channel members, who are all listed on the screen right now. Next time! On Friday, I'll be going back to the results of my recent Superman the Animated Series villain poll to talk about the character you selected. Up first, we have the tormentor of children across the universe, Granny Goodness. Then on Monday, I'll be back to mark the 15th anniversary of a DCAU adjacent film, Justice League: Crisis on Two Earths, in which the League goes up against their evil counterparts from an alternate universe. Hope to see you then.